Welcome to SUSD Spotlight, your go-to source for all things happening within the district. Whether it's celebrating student and staff achievements, delving into trending education topics, or highlighting inspiring human interest stories, we've got you covered. Join us as we illuminate the incredible endeavors taking place in our schools and forge connections within our community. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and engaged as we embark on this journey together, spotlighting the extraordinary in SUSD. Welcome to another edition of SUSD Spotlight. Today we're excited to welcome in studio Jim Rounds of Rounds Consulting. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So before we get started, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at Rounds Consulting.
Yeah, so I got my economics degrees at ASU after I was with Scottsdale Unified School District.
Wait, you're a legacy?
Yes.
And you graduated from?
Coronado.
Excellent.
So I didn't know what I wanted to do, and there was a great job opportunity that one of my professors was trying to encourage me to apply for, and that was down at the state capitol. So I started really getting into public policy, and I worked for a real estate economist, and for about 15 years after that. And then I started my own firm almost 10 years ago, and we focus on economics and public policy. So you'll see us down at the capitol a lot, advising people from the governor to different lawmakers, mayors throughout the state. We do private sector work as well. You have to do you have to pay the bills, but then you can volunteer some time and do some other work if you're lucky. So that's basically what we do. We try to make the state a better place.
And how is education key in all of that and the work that you do as it relates to economic development or the economic forecast for the state?
Oh, education is number one on the list because it directly translates into workforce quality. It translates into, if you have higher levels of academic achievement, then you have more tax collections, which means you have a more steady government entity that can provide services that are needed. And people think that businesses just need low taxes. Businesses need a lot of stuff. They need to be able to get their products to market, which means they need good roads, which are very expensive. They have to have quality workforce, but it's you have to have enough. If you're growing like Arizona, you have to have enough of a workforce. So going all the way back, it's not just the training for the workforce and getting those individuals coming out of college. You have to go back and improve programs in K-12 if we're going to have this long-term sustainable economic rate of growth that we've been enjoying the last decade or so.
And does K-12 become more of a focus given the opportunities for certifications and work-based learning? I know college obviously is what really drives the talent pool as well, but are you seeing more of a focus on K-12?
There has been, but I would say that our overall goal, just studying how the economy works, has been we don't need to make a decision between somebody going to a university versus getting a technical degree. That's the debate right now among a lot of lawmakers at the state. What we have to do is we have to lift everybody. We need to take that person that wasn't going to graduate high school and have them graduate high school. That person that was just going to graduate high school and not do something different, maybe go and get additional skill set. And then if everybody moves up, then we have enough income to generate the tax revenues to make these programs work, which gives you a positive return on investment. And you often hear about how a lot of lawmakers want to run government like a business. Well, if they do, then they would invest in those areas where it's going to generate more money for the taxpayer than it's going to cost them. That's how a business would make its investment. You're going to generate more profit than what you're investing. And in many cases, in fact, I don't think we've done a single analysis where we didn't have a positive ROI on a major education initiative, at least in the last 4 or 5 years. And even going back, we had a positive ROI within maybe a decade on some projects, but education I treat as intellectual infrastructure. If you're building roads, you do analyses over a long period of time because they last a long period of time. When you educate somebody, it lasts their lifetime, so you have to have a longer term for evaluation. But interestingly enough, Scottsdale Unified School District had a wonderful ROI when we did our own analysis.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that study that we worked on all together?
Yeah, we initially teamed up with our friends at ASU. In fact, it's the same professor that encouraged me to go take a job that I didn't think I could do at the Capitol. I was terrified of public speaking, and I didn't think I would be able to make it down there, and he encouraged me and said I could. Otherwise, I would be doing something quite different. So it's always great to have different mentors at different stages in your academic career and professional career. But when we when we teamed up, we took their core analysis and then we added some of our own, and we did a pretty straightforward calculation. We figured out what would the economic benefits be or the economic losses if the academic achievement level of SUSD declined to the state average. Or you can say, what would it be if the state improved SUSD's average? But in this case, it was what would happen. And the state would have lost enough tax revenue where the amount that is spent on educating a student in SUSD ends up being a fraction, 1/5 of the overall lifetime earnings and the tax revenue that's generated. And so we calculated an ROI of 5-to-1, which is a very, very large number. And because SUSD has a very high high school graduation rate, but not just that, it's more people go to college. They're encouraged to consider different programs. How are they going to go into a technical degree and still make great money? We're seeing some people even just going into technical fields and getting great jobs at some of these semiconductor plants that are opening up. So there's lots of opportunities, which means it's more and more of a challenge for you all because it means that you have to be flexible. And even though you have great statistics, there's always room for improvement.
So economic policy can be difficult for people to understand, but you always do such a nice job of really making it accessible to the listening public. I listened to you when you're interviewed on KTAR, and you've done presentations to superintendents. I'm curious, what will it take to get elected officials to listen to the economic analysis? Because you mentioned earlier, it's this calibration of the right amount of investment and the right amount of taxes in order to be able to drive the economic engine forward. And so what's the secret sauce to being able to get the kind of policy that really helps accelerate growth in the state of Arizona?
It's the business concept. It's the return on investment calculation. And so nobody really did analyses like this. Prior to COVID, we were hired to do a number of healthcare related analyses, benefits of a hospital, and we were dealing with Medicaid funding issues. And we worked with a couple of lawmakers and decided, let's go ahead and describe it like you would if you were a business owner, and how would you make proper decisions. And the legislature really responded to that. And then we went through the COVID period. Once we came out of that economic downturn, there were opportunities as more revenues came in, especially with the extra federal government spending, to try to figure out where should we spend the money. And so we had to calculate for the universities, for each of the three major universities here in the state, we had to calculate for each of their major budget requests what the ROI was going to be. And then we worked with them and they modified it. And we were very successful on what they called the New Economy Initiative over multiple years. And that's what added to the ASU engineering program, which is helping with the major semiconductor growth that we're seeing up in the North Phoenix area and some other areas. And so this is an example of how public policy can work. But we only got there because we got knocked on the mat after the Great Recession.
Right.
And the Republicans that primarily argued for tax cuts realized we need more. And the Democrats that typically argued for more spending in different areas realized we need to figure out a good balance. And so we had, after we analyzed the state, we actually were involved in that for the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And we ended up having Democrats support a couple of minor tax cuts, and we had Republicans support a whole new list of economic development programs. And ever since that year, we've had steady increases in the state in per capita personal income compared to the U.S., which is the best economic benchmark. So you can see a 3-decade decline. We have to respond because we got hit so hard during the recession, so people had to work together. And we've been one of the most aggressively advancing states in the country in terms of economic health, not just creating jobs, but creating higher wage jobs. But it gets back to the fundamentals. How do you do that? Everybody thinks of economics as supply and demand if they're just asked for a single point. The very first economic discussion had to do with productivity. That goes back to the philosopher saying, well, if you become an expert in a particular thing and then you trade, then you can increase your standard of living. How do you increase productivity? Education. You learn how to do stuff.
Right.
And so the very first principles in economics had to do with supporting education.
So when you think about the year or the next 2 years where we'll have divided government here in Arizona, what do you see as the opportunities on the horizon and what do you see as the big risk?
There's short-term and longer-term opportunities. The short-term opportunities are a couple or 3 years back when there was a lot of public policy discussions around a major tax cut where we lowered the individual income tax rate to 2.5% flat. About $500 million was set aside in the rainy day fund, which is that little savings account that we dip into during recessions typically, but this was set aside to keep the economy moving forward in economic development programs. And people haven't been talking about that yet, but revenues are still coming in above the forecast, which means lawmakers are willing to still spend a little bit to keep the economy moving forward, I hope. We'll have to do a number of these ROI analyses again, but the real opportunity is going to be Arizona's going to rocket out of this economic downturn because of the way everything's been set up. That means that as soon as a very soft landing it happens when it comes to the economy, and then we start to take off again, there's going to be a lot more revenue than is going to be projected. And so we need to stake claim to that and make sure that we don't spend too much, but we spend it in the right places. It's not really a lack of resources in a lot of cases. It's where are we putting those, and are we allowing those places where we put the money to generate even more money to reinvest in things like education. A lot of the programs that we recommend would pay for themselves. It's just a short-term cash flow issue to cover the year or two it takes until you generate that positive return on investment.
And so how do we go about educating, I guess, the lawmakers on this work, and is more of this work being done across other school districts, sort of the study that we did on our economic impact?
I think you got to keep telling the story. When we first got involved down at the Capitol, we had to explain how the economy worked, and we had to bring up base sector industries. And so when you provide incentives, you want to limit it to those industries that can locate in other states as well. You don't want to incentivize a McDonald's opening because they're going to open anyways. And so we had to give speech after speech after speech after speech, and eventually people understood it. So you have to be very repetitive. What we did, actually working with you all, it was a great team exercise on calculating the ROI that was so strong. That was just very unique to some of the discussions going on with Scottsdale Unified School District. But since then, we were brought into some other school districts just to give some light advising. And we worked with one, which is a very poor district, Cartwright, on the west side of the valley. And it was a different kind of analysis where the Department of Education was reviewing them in terms of to what extent are they taxing compared to other districts. Well, their taxes were relatively high, so they were being scolded. But they were being compared to a school district where I raised my son, which is Kyrene, and because of the student count is almost the same. So what we did is we put the property tax base of Kyrene and Cartwright and found out that Cartwright was managing its budget so well, it would have been the second lowest taxing district in the state if it had the opportunity to have a consistent property tax base. Wow. So sometimes you have to do calculations that are a little different. So I would say every school district has different opportunities. Every school district has different needs of the residents, but fundamentally, you got to get back to the basics. You have to figure out how can we raise the academic achievement level, and it's more difficult with lower income individuals than it is with others. It's not about race, it's about poverty. Poverty is the cancer of an economy. And if we can address some of that while we do things like have high graduation rates, have a lot of the students go to college, get degrees, earn more revenue, and maybe even stay in this particular region like myself, I think we have a great economic outlook.
When we talk about education, we talk about, teaching kids to love learning, to be lifelong learners and critical thinkers. Short of that, how do we prepare kids for an economy and jobs not yet imagined? Arizona's economy has been quite diversified over the last few decades, or last couple decades, I guess. We've seen it sort of become more tech-centric and some of those kinds of things. So what do you see on the horizon, and how do we best prepare students today for that which comes tomorrow?
Well, what you just said, so that's the accurate story of what's happening. And you want to set everybody up where they can have the greatest opportunities possible. So you can give somebody a career ladder. To some extent, you can influence how tall the career ladder is that you give them, but they have to climb it themselves. And so you have to have people interested in what they're doing. I've had people work for my business and they were super bright, but they just weren't as interested in public policy and some of the economic stuff we do, and so they didn't do all that well, because you have to enjoy what you're doing to do a really good job. Or it could be part of getting ahead. I didn't enjoy pushing grocery carts down the street here when it was 120 out, but I knew that was to help pay for college, and then other things were going to come. So, sometimes it's part of building up what you want to do. But I would say overall, we want to encourage students to look at these new opportunities, but I don't want to push it too much, because when I was in high school, the two most important things for me one was my Chevelle, and the other one was whatever girlfriend I had at the time. And so sometimes you have to be realistic with what's going to be a priority among students. I would say in the younger grades, you have parental-based programs to educate the parents, because parents have the biggest influence on a student than anybody else. And then as the students get older, you start to provide information and let them decide what they want to do. But there's been a lot of discussion about, let's try to get more students to just want to do the technical degrees and not want to have higher aspirations. That's not how to do it. We can lift everybody. We'll have more than enough workforce to keep this momentum going if everybody moves up that academic ladder at least one step.
And can we accomplish that if we don't continue to invest in public education?
We'll have to invest in public education. And again, it gets back to what kind of program are you recommending? And years ago, the education groups were focused on, we're $1 billion short, or we're $2 billion short. One study showed they were $5 billion short. They're not going to get $5 billion. They weren't going to get $1 billion. But once programs were starting to be discussed at the individual program level, like let's say it was an all-day kindergarten, you analyze what are the benefits, what could be the extra revenue that would be achieved if we conducted a thorough study on it. You have to review this stuff. You have to do the math, and then you can decide what program should we select. Kind of like I was talking about the new economy initiatives with the universities. You can, once you identify how effective they're going to be, you can queue them and then fund them properly. And it's no different than having a business plan. And I think that's the way to go. We get pushback sometimes by saying that if teachers get paid a little bit more money, they're not going to do a better job. Well, I guess you could argue that at the margin. If you just gave somebody an extra $100, are they going to do a better job? Well, no, but over a longer period of time, if they were paid more, might they feel less beaten down? Might they be more interested in staying in the industry a little bit longer? And then in the greater scheme, in terms of how you build an economy, the higher wages and the better investment is going to translate into higher academic achievement. And I always like to argue, I always bring up, because the legislative session is always during the early spring, late winter, when there's a Super Bowl. And that's when TV sales are the highest. And I say, I usually ask one of my conservative friends, when was the last time you bought a TV? And they're so cheap now, it'll be more recent. I said, okay, well, when you bought it, did you just go and buy the cheapest one available, or what did you do? It's like, no, I needed extra HDMI cables or ports, so I went ahead and I kind of got the mid-tier one. So you said spending a little bit more money got you a better product. Yes. Okay, now let's talk about education again. Does spending a little more get you a better product? Yes, but it's also about keeping people motivated. And that point about some of my interns and the younger staff that ended up leaving, it was they didn't feel as motivated because it just wasn't their area. Well, if you're having a hard time with enjoying the classroom, if you don't have, at least some form of discipline, if you don't have some programs that allow the teachers to have a little bit of control, I think it would be really hard to stay motivated. Being a teacher is kind of like going into politics right now. I feel like there's a lot of people that would like to do it, but on the political side, there's a lot of people like myself that were planning on doing it that no longer are, because it just seems distasteful. On the being a teacher, I feel like we have to make it where the teachers feel motivated. We get a lot of outstanding applicants. That's the key. It's like any other industry. You have to make it appealing to get the best talent. And just because it's government doesn't mean that it's any different.
Well, I appreciate your financial analysis always, and particularly framing it in terms of return on investment. At the end of each one of our podcasts, I like to ask my guests to think about a teacher who invested in your life that made a difference that you could elevate and celebrate as we bring this conversation to a close.
Sure. And so thinking about SUSD, there's one teacher that came to mind. It was Dr. Rogers. He was my sixth grade teacher. And I remember him for slightly different reasons. And so my best friend in sixth grade was a little bit of a troublemaker, and he got in trouble. And I was a little bit of the nerdy kid, and I didn't get in trouble. And he was asked to push his desk back behind the other students as kind of a punishment when he acted up for a week. Well, I slowly pushed my desk back until I was next to his, and Dr. Rogers said nothing about that. And not knowing, I thought, oh, we were pretty sneaky. Did he not notice? It was like 25 kids in the room, so obviously he noticed, but he realized that maybe it was a good balance between the two of us to, maybe strengthen our friendship. That's something where it didn't really hit me until later in life that was something so subtle. It was him not doing something, but darn well that he saw that. And we were best friends after that, and it was great. But isn't that just an interesting small thing that somebody did that had an impact on two different people's lives?
I think it's really powerful to hear the testimonials. We're proud to claim you as a legacy of SUSD, and so grateful for your willingness to speak with us today. Thank you, Jim.
Anytime, call anytime.
We hope that our listeners enjoyed this episode and that you will pitch us more ideas for future episodes on our website at susd.org/spotlight.